Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss mobility strategies in the federal government. With me today on the show are Rick Walsh, the mobility lead at the U.S. Army, Ken Nesbit, the Associate Chief Information Officer, Infrastructure Operations at the Department of the Treasury, Eric Olson, Director of Systems Engineering at the Department of Justice, Jason Frye, Chief Technology Officer for Mobility at BMC Software, Mike Pagani, the Solutions Director and Evangelist for Mobility and BYOD at Dell Software, and Bryan, Coapstick, the Director, HP Mobile Innovation, HP Enterprise Services. Let's get into the discussion. We're talking mobility. Let's start off with Rick Walsh over at Army. Rick, talk a little bit about the strategy that you have in the Army for mobility solutions.
To discuss the Army's position on mobility in terms of our strategy would be to bring as close as possible commercial mobile devices that are properly secured and access controlled into the Army. Our goal ultimately is to enable the Army user themselves, what we call the knowledge worker, to go out and purchase their own device and do work on a privately owned device. But we're several years away from that, but we're working towards that goal.
Yeah, I know the BYOD issue's been a hot issue, but I think as you peel back the onion, there's a lot of little hoops you got to jump through before you can actually get there with liabilities and so forth and so forth. Eric Olson, how about over Justice? What do you guys have in way of a mobility strategy?
The Department of Justice has a very diverse law enforcement mission. We have agencies focused on law enforcement, litigation, grant making. It's a very diverse set. So our approach has really been to infuse mobility into all our planning processes, our IT strategic planning process, our digital government process. But ultimately, our goal specifically under that broader strategy is to get a mobile device into the hands of every DOJ employee where it makes sense for them to have one. Where there's a good business need. We want to extend the perimeter of our enterprise architecture from the desktop to a mobile device edge. We want to exploit those unique processing capabilities that we are finding on devices, cameras, GPS, biometrics. And over time, we're really going to look at the desktop, we're going to look at that edge device and rationalize whether or not they can be merged and, in fact, help us deliver some cost savings there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting watching the evolution of, or the disappearance, I think, of traditional desktops as we move to tablets and mobile devices and so forth over time. Mike Pagani over Dell Software, how does Dell positioning what kind of strategies do you have to support your government customers with all these mobility programs?
Yeah, well, I think when you look at Dell's mission in this area, especially from a mobility BYOD perspective, it's really in the area of providing access, but not just access. The relationship between security and security software and techniques when you get into mobility and BYOD is very strong. Right. So when you go on a mobility or BYOD initiative, it's going to drag in a bunch of different things. So it's not just the access, it's securing the access, and it's managing the deployment all the way across the board. So for us at Dell, it's really trying to craft an end-to-end solution for people, and that's where, especially if you look at government agencies and coming into the public sector, they have some unique nuances. So
you brought up some good points too. We'll visit a little bit later when we talk about some challenges too, about some of the things that they've been doing that end-to-end work. Ken Nesbit over Treasury. What's the strategy at Treasury to adopt mobility solutions as part of your IT strategies?
So, across the Treasury, we have multiple bureaus, and each of the bureaus are working towards a BYOD, a bring your own device kind of activity. But specifically where I'm at the Treasury, we have launched into the effort strongly of bring your own device. And we're doing that from the perspective that, we went from the world of computers on your desk, and then we moved to the world of laptops, and then we moved into the world of teleworking and working from the beach while you're on vacation. We seem to do that quite a bit. But the problem is you don't really have technology anytime, anywhere for anyone. Right. So we're kind of proceeding in that type of approach, in that we don't really want to tie you to a laptop or a desktop, but at the same time we'll provide those. But we're okay with you using your tablet, your cell phone, those types of devices. So we're really working hard to move in that direction. We already have some BYOD solutions at Treasury.
Oh, good.
So we're working pretty hard on making it a better place for the employee.
Sure, it sounds great. It's funny because people ask me, now that you do some consulting, this and the other thing, what are your hours and when do you work? I say, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know when I work. I'm working now, I guess, but I'm having fun doing this.
Sure.
But nighttime, daytime, in between the 9th and 10th hole in the golf course, you're doing your. So you got it. It's sort of anytime we can. Jason, over BMC Software, what is some of the strategies that you guys have to support your customers with mobility solutions?
The biggest thing for us at BMC is to think about mobility in terms of the user and not the device. Because at the end of the day, the thing that's moving around is the person holding the device or moving between the different types of access that they have into IT. And so we're taking a very direct approach around empowerment for the end user and looking to allow organizations that we partner with to secure the device, the application, or the content that happens to be on that device, regardless of the device type.
Right.
But really, at the end of the day, focusing on the needs of the end user and how they need to interact with IT and do their work. Because at the end of the day, we all have a mission or a job to do, and we believe that mobility is an empowering technology. And so we're designing our strategy with the end user in mind and then driving that down to the particular needs of whatever agency we happen to be working with.
Yeah, that's a great point. Focusing on the user, and I would argue also the data in the apps needed by that user as opposed to the device
That's right.
itself. I remember the early days of computers, we were putting all this software on every machine in the organization, and 90% of the people were not going to use 90% of the stuff that was actually on that machine. So it does make sense. Bryan, Coapstick, what is the HP Enterprise Services strategy to support your government customers with mobility solutions?
So primarily we're focused on really providing that universal access to people, applications, and data, making it matter. Making means driving real results. For employees, it's fundamentally, streamlining their day-to-day work lives and removing some of the bureaucracy and barriers to challenge. For citizens, it's about removing the distance barrier to enable direct interaction with your government and make it more personal, more contextual as they go through that experience. And for your partners and for collaboration and information sharing, it's basically enabling you to seamlessly interact with them and tailoring the experience as you go based on contextual type cues so that as we move across the paradigm, we're looking at it to drive an outcome. It's the business first, then the technology. Because how do I take finite resources and solve the problems, the most pivotal problems, to solve what we need to get done today?
Right. Yeah, good point too. We don't want to just the craze where everybody wants the device, but let's first find out why you need the device and what is the actual use for the device. Let's talk about benefits you see coming. Presumably we're all moving into mobility, and we've got some ideas that we're going to see some benefits coming out of this. Let's start with Ken Nesbit this time. Ken, what are some of the benefits you see accruing from going to your mobility solutions?
Well, of course, the overall value is going to kind of build. We can do business cases all day long.
Right.
That talk about if we have employees using their own devices, what that does for us as an agency. So,
Right.
for instance, I wouldn't have to buy as many laptops. I wouldn't have to refresh as many laptops. I could actually go back to the world of having desktops, which are a little bit less costly. I could even move into the world of what I like to call going back to the future and go with zero and thin clients, where
Right.
we now have the new modernized green screens,
That's
if
true.
you will.
That's true.
So those of us that are a bit older, we know what that means.
Oh, yeah, I've been there, done that.
As my daughter would say
Sure.
back in the dark ages. But so some of the benefits are that really, from an equipment perspective, that's one approach. What I'm trying to get to, though, is I want customers to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
It is all about the business, but when it's all about the business, how does the employee get the business done?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it earlier. We're always on. Federal employees today, depending upon their types of jobs, you're always on. You're strapped to a BlackBerry, you're strapped to a cell phone, you're strapped to a laptop. And, when your boss wants to get a hold of you at 2 o'clock in the morning because the power just went out, that's how you get a hold of them.
Yeah.
So the benefits from a dollar perspective, I think we're going to have to add those up as we move into it.
Sure.
Because with anything else, you got to buy stuff to save stuff.
Right.
And that seems to be something we forget from time to time.
Yeah, and it's tough in a sequestration thing, to sometimes to get to that point. But I think, I like your point about happy employees. I used to tell all my managers, if you empower and make your employees like what they're doing, want to do, they'll take care of all the problems.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Eric, what do you think? What's some of the benefits you see coming from a mobility strategy at Justice?
Mobility is ultimately going to enable the Department of Justice to better accomplish our mission. It already is helping in that regard. In the near term, I think what that looks like is flexibility for our law enforcement agents, our litigators. What we're seeing is new patterns of collaboration develop. I mean, these are not things that we sort of set up for them. Mm-hmm. When they have these devices, they sort of figure these new work patterns out. So it's very interesting to watch it. When you empower the user with that much capability,
right,
they figure out new ways to do their job. I think over time, as we get better at developing and deploying mobile applications, what we're really seeing the benefit is new ways of doing business, new processes, business processes arising that would not have existed before had we not had this device in our hands and if it had not been nearly ubiquitous throughout our user community.
Yeah. Well said, and you're exactly right about, empowerment and creativity and innovation follows. I mean, take a look at our kids these days. You give them a device and every day they're coming back. They got something really cool that they figured out how to do and whatever. So you're right. It's encouraging that innovation. Rick, what do you think? Rick Walsh at Army. What are some of the areas that you think you'll see real benefits coming out of the mobility strategies?
Well, I think we're already seeing in the Army, we're already seeing some great benefits and some what I call magnificent efficiencies. We have, think about MedCom, which is the medical command, and the way they operate their side of the business. So they're looking at putting in place a wellness program. This is one example where rather than making people better when they're sick, is keeping them well so they don't get sick. So now think about a situation where you have a cardiac patient who's now been given an iPad or a tablet device, and they're tracking their day. Their family keeps track of them as well. So now I'm sharing their cardiac care with their family members. So now I know what you eat, and are you doing your exercises, and your wife, your brother, your friends know, and if you slip, they're going to let you know. So I've empowered your family through mobility to make you well.
Wow, that's interesting.
And then another issue we've got, a really big one, is United States Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers. They have several programs that are amazing programs, MICA and Blue Roof. If you know what happens during an earthquake or a hurricane, people's roofs get torn off. And a Blue Roof situation is with FEMA, with the organizations, the Corps of Engineers will put a new roof on a house. We've been able to put tarps on houses. We've been able to do this process in a matter of minutes rather than days. So homeowners down in the Mississippi Delta that were experiencing the floods and such are now getting their homes saved and that kind of stuff. And the savings are not just to the Army. They're not just to the government. They're savings to the people. And that's how we see real efficiencies gained. We're not really, for me, I don't look at the money's going to come, the savings are going to come, but I look at how I change my business processes and how that works for me and how I share with the community that I support.
Yeah, terrific. I've said this before, but I believe we're moving to a world where decision making will be made as time equals zero. I mean, we're getting that close. I mean, when a terrorist attack, you may not have much of a warning, or a decision that needs to be made. And mobility is clearly going to allow that decision making when time approaches zero to be a reality. Bryan, Coapstick, what do you think in terms of some benefits you see accruing by going to mobility strategies?
So I often describe mobility as the power of WILD, the ability to deliver the good or service more effectively while still reducing costs. We're seeing by providing that universal access, to your point, when time equals zero, decision support to enable, more real-time access to the information for better decision making. There's always that distance associated with information in terms of latency, things like that. You always make the decisions with the best information you have at hand. But, beyond that, we're seeing increased employee engagement, constituency engagement and satisfaction, the ability to outreach in new ways, as well as, clearly productivity and transaction capability. Like, for example, we built a an app for HUD. And during Hurricane Sandy, somebody, with phone lines down, things like that, they were still able to file to make people aware that there was an issue and that they needed help. And those are great stories because that transactional capability wouldn't have been available to them by other means.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, what I like in the discussion here, we're hearing situations where we're actually dealing with saving lives or responding to serious issues and so forth, and mobility is playing a major role in being able to do that. Jason Frye over BMC, what do you think are some of the benefits you see coming out of mobility strategies?
Well, I like empowered users, and empowered users are happy users, and happy users means happy IT. And at the end of the day, from a mobility
Sounds like
perspective,
something in the water to me.
it is. And I'll tell you, really, it's when you get to happy users, you think about what makes them happy, and it's being able to do their jobs more efficiently. And from a mobility perspective, we believe mobility is about removing friction from an employee's ability to perform whatever job or mission that they happen to be doing. And really, when you get down to it, when you remove the friction from the equation, you have more productive employees. And more productive employees means you do more. And if you're in a revenue-generating business, you generate more revenue. If you're in government, you can do more mission. And when your employees are happy, you then free IT up to do more productive things for the organization. So we think mobility has a larger trend around just a simple device that happens to be moving around. We think it fundamentally changes the way that employees work in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, very good. I also used to tell people, if you find a job that you really like doing, then you really don't work anymore.
That's right.
Mike Pagani at Dell, what do you think are some of the benefits that are going to accrue out of these mobility strategies?
Well, I think I'm going to address this question in a couple of different ways here.
Okay.
Obviously, from the end user perspective, I think it's the flexibility that it provides, knowing that I'm not bound to my desk at the office. If there's something I need to get done and critical, well, perhaps I stop on the way home from work and attend my son's soccer game and stay connected, and I can then finish some things off. Or the work day kind of gets a little bit gray here, right? When you have this type of connectivity. And that's one of the huge benefits, I think, is just that flexibility it provides, and it creates productivity because people are working where they are. And from a BYOD perspective, I might add a little twist there too. I think one of the biggest drivers for that is people can be productive what they already know how to use. Okay, so when you look at deploying new devices, cuts that learning curve for IT. And then the flip side to what I was going to mention is, from an IT perspective, the technologies have really grown up now. I think everybody's wanted mobility for a long time because the benefits are so apparent and so impactful. But IT's had the biggest challenge of now, how do I accomplish that and empower IT so they can provide a quality solution? And that's where we're seeing a lot of the technologies grow up right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I do want to visit some of the challenges too, because I think you're right. I think the technology's getting there, but I still feel there are some challenges that are going to need to be overcome in order to really get to where we want to go with all this. And we'll talk about those challenges, but first we're going to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Rick Walsh from the U.S. Army, Ken Nesbit from Treasury, Eric Olson from Department of Justice, Jason Frye from BMC Software, Mike Pagani from Dell Software, and Bryan Coapstick from HP Enterprise Services. We're talking mobility. When we went to break, we talked about benefits. Now let's talk about the hard stuff, the things that are some of the constraints or some of the challenges that we have that we need to overcome to get where you want to go. Let's start with Eric this time. Eric over at Justice. What are some of the challenges with mobility that you face on a day-to-day basis?
Right. At the Justice Department, a lot of our risks, our challenges focus around the risk management equation, sort of striking the right balance. So I'll give you an example. Question is, how much do we lock these devices down?
Right.
So for example, we could take a sort of very draconian approach to that, really limiting what the folks can do with that, but we sort of inhibit the usability of the device and tend to tamper some of those collaborative tendencies that can come out when folks have them in their hand. On the flip side, if we open that device up too much, then we sort of run into problems, security issues and whatnot. So really striking that balance.
Where is that equilibrium?
Right, and given the very sort of broad group of folks that we have and the broad mission, it's a challenge. Another area I think is as we encourage folks to use this mobile device, and we have a proliferation of them, and we have more mobile apps, we're necessarily going to see the demand for bandwidth, and that really becomes a cost management issue,
Right.
because as you know, in this environment, that's
Right.
that's paramount. So we need to be more resourceful and diligent about containing those costs.
Yeah.
So there's a couple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in the very early days of cell phones, pretty much every agency blew the budget right out of the, it started off with a budget and just blew it out. I mean, but I think over time, people are getting better handle on how to manage these devices. Right, Rick Walsh, how about the Army? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that are still tough to do to get where you want to go?
Well, for the Army, probably the most difficult thing that I have to deal with on a regular basis is, we could go back to traditional thinking, is getting the people who are at the decision-making point to embrace this new way of working. And the second part of that would be what we call in the Army is time to market. The devices, the technology is changing so fast, but actually are going to allow me to use the devices are so embedded in the old way of doing business. Not the old way's not bad, but this way they think that if you look at what we'll call the traditional mobile environment, applications change about every 90 days. Mm-hmm. Devices change once a year, and operating systems change about every 6 months. For me to roll out Windows 7, it took me 4.5 years. Between developing an Army Gold Master, getting the help desk in place, and then making distribution and deploying that across the Army. If I wait that long, I might as well throw away mobile because I can't get there in time. In 6 months, I've got a brand new device. I've got a new operating system, and I've had 3 changes to the applications. I have to change the way I do business. I have to change the way I think. That's my challenge.
Yeah.
And on top of that is money. I don't have any money.
Right. And I challenge some of the clients I work with now. I tell them that you first have to have a solution that saves money, and not like 3 years from now, saves money now. Or it's not even worth talking to some agencies at this point until we see what happens with the budget climate. But your other point is very good. I used to argue, the certification and accreditation processes we have, by the time you certify and accredit and get the authority to operate, your 3 more generations of devices have come out. So, we're constantly working behind. Absolutely. That whole process has to be, reevaluated for the mobility. And I guarantee, I mentioned the kids before, but when some of these kids get in the workplace and are told, well, you got to be certified and accredited and then authority to operate, and that's going to take 6 months. That's not going to be the world they're used to living in. Ken, Nesbit, what do you think are some of the challenges you face? What are some of the tough things yet that you're trying to get accomplished in order to get where you want to go with your strategies?
Wow. So, I agree with my colleagues. First off, you have to have money. Mm-hmm. Right, that's the one big piece that we really have to have. So how do you get there? Well, you have to be able to show the value of doing the kind of things that we're doing, and that you're not going to just throw away what you already have in place. You've already spent a lot of money on your infrastructure. You've spent a lot of money on desktops and laptops, which was the thing to do. And now we want people to be able to use their own devices, so you have to wrap that infrastructure around it. So when you look at where we are today, I sort of think back to my time in the Air Force, what seems like a million years ago now, since everything moves at such light speed. I came from the mainframe environment, and back then, from an accreditation perspective, it was okay to take a little bit of time to make sure that your systems were secure. Today, security is one of our biggest challenges.
Sure.
Not because it's a bad thing, but because many of our security policies date back a number of years. Now, they're all catching up real fast. They have to, but the reality of it is as we get ready to roll out new devices, new technologies, new capabilities, the security guys and gals are scrambling, trying to make sure that the next bad guy hasn't already found a way to get into the newest device that we've got, which is typically a year to 2 years old when we roll it out anyway.
Sure.
So how do we get ahead of the next bad guy?
Right.
We have to think like them.
Yeah.
And in the government right now, we just don't deploy and implement that way.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think, we've had many discussions about cybersecurity on the Cybersecurity Show about trying to get proactive, because my argument is we've been reactive with technology, and we we've been putting Band-Aids on things forever. You know, something breaks, we fix it. Something breaks, we fix it. Somehow we got to get out in front, and maybe with things like cloud and data center consolidations, there could be opportunities to do that, but we'll see. Let's go to Jason Frye and get an industry perspective here. What are some of the challenges you face, some of the really hard things that you're trying to get done in order to help your customers get where they want to go with mobility?
It's interesting because with mobility, you start to run into a pretty significant cultural challenge that exists inside of organizations. And there's a dividing line that happens between Generation X and Generation Y around how employees want to use a mobile device in their jobs.
You don't think everybody in the entire organization agrees with what device to use and what which type of product and so forth?
No, and then I don't think that there's a lot of understanding with younger workers that are entering the fold around what the real challenges are that they may face, and they may be punishing IT and doing something that we call shadow IT, where they sort of do what they want to do, and they work around the edges of security in environments. And that's going to really differ between different agencies, because some agencies you go around the rules, you go to jail. Other agencies you get a slap on the wrist. But at BMC, what we're trying to do is deliver a set of technologies that allow agencies to embrace what employees want to do. And really, when we look at devices, we think about the user. So it's protecting the application and protecting the data, and then managing the proper entitlements. And so, if an employee needs to use a particular application, make it easy for the agency to provide that application to their employees in a secure manner. If an employee wants to use a special type of device, make it device agnostic so that the agency can say, yeah, sure, you can use the latest and greatest widget from whatever Android manufacturer happens to be shipping something today. But overcoming those cultural issues is something that we really counsel our customers and our partners to help them understand what types of things they're going to be facing, because they may not be even thinking that some 19-year-old who just, is on a co-op internship is going to bring some crazy stuff into the agency and sort of just make it work.
Right.
And that's really, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we face as a vendor, is to try to make sure that we provide the types of solutions to help our government partners meet those.
Yeah, well said. That culture issue, we're now 96 for 96, by the way. This is our 96th show. And every show we have done to date, someone has put the culture issue on the table as being a challenge. And I can't tell you how many times we've heard it's not the technology, it's the culture of the organization that are some of the difficult things. You had a comment to make on that, Rick?
I'd make a really critical comment that I see right now that's affecting us is mobility is affecting who I can hire and who will accept the job.
Wow.
If I go forward and tell a young, smart graduate from a great Virginia school or any school in the country, say, oh, by the way, you can't bring your cell phone and you can't have that device, they walk out the door.
Right.
They don't want the job. And I'm seeing that now even with senior people. I'm seeing that when I bring on senior leaders in the Army at the SES and director level positions that are actually saying, oh, I'm in a secure environment, I can't bring my personal device, I can't have it, I'll just go somewhere else and get a job.
Wow.
So it's affecting the people I can hire. I'm not getting the best candidates. We're still getting good candidates. We're not getting some candidates that would just turn it away because of my inability to secure mobile devices, to secure that environment that allows them to come to work for me.
Wow.
So not only is it affecting me, it's affecting who I can hire, which is affecting my future.
Wow, that's an interesting point. Ken, you have a point on that too?
Sure. Let me sort of jump on that for just a second, because that's a key point. I can remember going in and having some interviews with the Intuit people, and it was amazing to me when their president for HR walks in with a tank top and flip-flops, and was probably only about 24 years old, maybe.
Right.
The other part of the reality is that when you're trying to hire that great employee, what do you mean I can't work at home in Florida? Why do I have to be confined to a cubicle in a building in Washington, D.C.? I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And you told me that, but you're going to make me sit in a building someplace I don't want to live, so why can't I work from my home in Florida? Well, because that's not the way we do things. So that's a challenge for us.
Yeah, that's very interesting. They're interesting points that have not been brought up before, but I see that challenge just growing over time as mobility gets more and more mature and continues to evolve. It sounds to me like it might be a competitive process for hiring people. Mike Pagani, what do you think are some of the challenges yet that you see that need to be overcome to get these mobility solutions out there?
Yeah, it's interesting. We see the challenge a couple of different ways. Also for us as a vendor, I mean, we've got to find the right mix of the hardware, the software, and the services to help people figure this all out. I mean, I got to tell you, private sector, public sector, it doesn't matter. Every IT department's under the same gun right now, and there's a term, the word that keeps coming up is I'm under pressure. The word pressure keeps coming up because I think when you add mobility and BYOD into the mix, it's not necessarily something that you've proactively decided to do as an IT department. This is to serve your stakeholders who are bringing it to you, so it's largely reactive. And one of the things that we try to help people rationalize is how do I fit mobility and BYOD and the benefits of that and being successful with it into a scheme where you're already probably busy on some other initiatives. So I'll tell people all the time, I said, if you're looking like, how do I provide the access? How do I secure it? How do I manage it? Well, the word is it depends. And I have to ask, what are you already doing in the areas? Are you virtualizing your desktops?
Right.
Are you deploying applications from the cloud? What's the range of devices that you're looking at doing? The new tablets, the Windows RT type tablets in the middle between laptops and traditional computers, that's graying the waters there too. Mm-hmm. So that's what I always tell them. I said, depends. What's in the data center, what's from the cloud, and what's on the device is going to dictate from a security standpoint. It's, not only just what you're connecting with,
Right.
but it's what you're connecting to and through also matters.
Sure.
And we have to rationalize that with your other projects that you're already doing.
Sure, this IT stuff's complicated, and I think, when a lot of folks sit back, and they look at the picture and say, well, big deal, mobility, give people a device and whatever, let them connect to the network, and you're off and running. Many people don't look at what it really takes and what are the real issues there that need to be overcome, and I think people wonder why it doesn't move faster. Well, I think it's moving at a pace that it can move at based upon the constraints that need to be dealt with. Bryan, Coapstick, what do you think are some of the, now, it's always dangerous to be the last one on this question because you could probably just say, well, ditto, but let's start with ditto, and what can you add to the ditto?
Absolutely. So, I think the policy and process that somebody brought up earlier, because, policy and process equals time, and time is the killer of all things. Somehow we need to re-engineer, reimagine these processes so that they fit within a mobile life cycle. Right now, most, manufacturer software vendors are turning product 9 months to a year. I know that's roughly what we're doing. So, somehow we have to figure out how we fit these processes because many of these manufacturers can't keep the supply chain together that long. So understanding that, I think some of the other key things that I would say is, understanding who you're building it for and what the business need. I think we're seeing in many cases a lot of what I would call random acts of mobility. Interesting, but, really trying to understand those things. Sometimes I think we get hung up on the B2C, B2B, B2E, whether they're my employer, my customers, my constituents, things like that. They're all real people, and they're all people with real needs. And, enabling those people, I think, additionally, sometimes we get sidetracked by the technology, device, app, containerization, HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, native, which is the wrong thing. Focus on the business problem and the business need you're trying to solve. There is no business value to an app that doesn't get used. So the one thing I will say is if we don't use mobility as a means to drive the adoption curve, then we failed. Because right now, traditional ERP systems have like about a 30% adoption rate. The quickest way to resolve some of the budget challenges, things like that, is actually get people interacting with these systems and making it seamless and flawless. It used to be we would wrap, users around the system. Now we got to wrap the systems around the users.
Interesting point.
So, it's just a very, very new way of looking at it. But just keep in mind, it wasn't too long ago that we thought the solar system, everything revolved around the Earth. In reality, it all revolves around the sun. And in this case, it really has to revolve around the user because we can put all the security measures, and I'm not minimizing it because that is a real challenge that we've got to face.
Right.
But it needs to be that contextual security. It's not a one-size-fits-all. What are you trying to achieve? What data are you passing? How can I enable it so I'm truly enabling the users to get real value?
Yeah, well said. Good points there. And you brought up security, and I think we should do a little bit more discussion around that security issue because I think that is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And I know we heard, Eric talked about just the diversity of the mission. So I'm sure across Justice, I'm sure in the Army, and I'm sure in Treasury, there are so many different categories of processes and programs and people that the security needs are not going to be one size fits all. I mean, some are going to be much more serious than others. But let's start with you, Rick, this time. You know, how are you even approaching that complex security issue when you're talking about mobility solutions?
Well, what we're doing right now with mobility is that the Army has embraced the DoD mobile initiative, and that is what we're working with DISA to provide today the technology that's accepted, that we've adopted, is the MDM and mobile device management, as well as mobile applications, server and store, so that we know what's on the device, we can control the device, we know how it's being used. And again, we're currently in a point where we're not embracing BYOD. We're only looking at government-furnished equipment. So I own the equipment, I own what you can do on it, and I can control how it's being used. So today, that's my paradigm, is that we're still looking very much at it's a government piece of equipment that I'm providing you to do a government job. We really have not moved towards the other side of the house, which we need to get to, but right now it's control, control, control.
Sure, and I think you're right. I think the security issue changes dramatically when you go to BYOD. What are you going to put on someone's device that the employee owns themselves, personal device, and then what happens if it breaks, and who does the help desk, and you're on and on and on. Eric, how are you guys approaching this thing, the complexities around security and mobility?
As a law enforcement agency, obviously security is very important to us. It's paramount. It really sort of, it's something we deal with a day-to-day basis in sort of all corners of the Department of Justice. And we start from the point that we already have a very secure, robust security apparatus. Sure. I'm talking the policies, the capabilities we have, standards and things of that nature. So we're really talking about extending those to the mobile device. And the way that we've sort of approached that is we've been working with other agencies, in particular Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, around defining sort of a minimum set of a minimum configuration to meet security requirements. We're also working closely with industry, tracking their product roadmaps, their overall security capabilities. And so what we have in the middle that sort of develops is this gap of where we are and where we need to be. And in the middle of that gap is a risk-based decision on how do we configure the device, who do we give it to, and we sort of manage it that way.
Yeah, actually, I think this issue is just another one. This is just going to continue to evolve too, and I think the challenges are going to continue to grow. Ken Nesbit, what do you think are some of the issues that you see with the security, or how are you addressing the security?
So I'll just sort of be pretty quick about it.
Okay.
So as I was growing up in the IT community, it always seemed like the security folks were those boys and girls who were lurking in the background to destroy my project.
To say no.
To say no. And we sort of always did security at the end. Well, today where I'm at, I sit right next to our cybersecurity guy, and my best friends are now the security folks. So we try to hit it up front and fast before we get down the road too far where they can say, that's not the way you want to go. We try to figure it out up front first from a security perspective and then stay within their guidelines. Sometimes they have to run a little fast to keep up with us. We have to slow down a little bit to be with them. That's the only way we're going to deliver what we need to deliver.
Right. Well, that's a great point. In fact, we had Ed Roebuck, your guy, on the show, cybersecurity show. But I used to say to my security folks, look, I want to do this. So I know you got some hang-ups with it, so figure out how I can do it. I mean, tell me what I got to do to get it done. Don't tell me no. Tell me how to do it.
What's the risk letter that
That's
I
right.
have to sign?
That's right. I want to hear from our industry guests on this too, but we first need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Rick Walsh from the U.S. Army, Ken Nesbit from the Department of Treasury, Eric Olson, Department of Justice, Jason Frye from BMC Software, Mike Pagani from Dell Software, and Bryan Coapstick, HP Enterprise Services. When we went to break, we were talking the challenge with securing mobile devices, and we heard from our government guests. Let's hear from our industry panelist. Bryan Coapstick over at HP Enterprise Services. How are you addressing that security issue?
So at HP, security is in our DNA, right? I mean, we're one of the largest security software and solution providers in the world. I would say we are working hand in hand with HP Labs to basically develop the next generation of mobile security. We're in the unique position, we have the breadth of portfolio to manage or monitor and assess the security from the device all the way back to the cloud or the data center. So, really a lot of our focus is what concept we call security in context. And really, the age of the password's dying. Everything's moving towards multi-factor authentication across the board. And, fundamentally as the sheer number of endpoints increases, because we're talking about smartphones, but, additional sensors are going to come into the environment as well. How are we going to manage the information sharing? Who do I share with? In what context? Maybe in certain contexts, and a very keen example is the public emergency type scenario. I might be much more quick to share that information with other agencies, other organizations, regardless. So really, we need a much more dynamic environment, and that's really what we're trying to enable in that security context.
Right. Mike Pagani, what do you think on security? How's Dell addressing that mobile security issue?
Well, I'd like to share a quick statistic, too, because
Okay.
this even blew me away. I was
All right,
looking
go
at a new go-to-market plan that we're putting together for next year. And in the year 2012, and this is according to Gartner, mobility and BYOD drove a 7.9% year-over-year increase in security software sales. So that just shows you the impact of what this trend actually is causing people to have to go out and buy. And security, you bring it up as the number one issue. And from our perspective at Dell, I mean, we've had great solutions for a long time. If you're inside the four walls, as far as being a single identity or one identity, what applications do I have access to, and what rights within those applications? Do I get the full capabilities of the app, or only certain things, and what data do I have access to? So what we're doing now is helping people in the way of extending that same mentality out to devices that may be known or unknown. If I'm coming in with a brand new device, how do I get that securely onto the network, provide the access that they want, but still assume the identity, make sure it is the person, as you brought up, Bryan brought up, with two-factor authentication, other things that have to be there, especially in a BYOD world. Is it, I know the device, but is it the person using it, right? Because it's not a device that I issued. And then do I let them on the network with our firewall products and things like that? So it's that, again, it's that you're connecting with, to, and through mentality, and then when you're there, what rights do they have?
Right.
But extending that out now to the mobile world.
Excellent, excellent. Jason Frye, what do you think? Well, how is BMC addressing the security issues?
So at BMC, we partner with our government agency customers to make sure that our products and solutions that we deliver meet whatever their requirements are. So common criteria, STIG, whatever it happens to be, we're doing that from an applications perspective. But when we really look at security, one of the things we ask our customer, are you trying to protect against malicious intent or accidental intent? And I think when you really think about if you're trying to secure against malicious intent versus just somebody losing a device accidentally, the types of things you need to do around security really become more clear. And that really drives us from an application design perspective and the types of solutions we offer to our customers. Malicious intent, you probably want to lock things down as much as you can, both from a device level, a content level, and an applications level on the device. And that's going to fundamentally remove some freedoms from the end user, but provide more protection for the agency. When we look at protecting against accidental intent, that's where we think about, hey, can we just protect the application, user access controls, et cetera? And from a BMC perspective, we're trying to deliver both sets of capabilities to our customers, but keeping in mind that the end user is going to really drive things from how they want to use things. So if you try to protect against malicious intent and you lock things down too much, then you may lose the benefits of mobility. So we're really trying to balance the types of things that we deliver.
That equilibrium point
That's
that
exactly right.
Eric made earlier in the show. The interesting thing for me, it's coming across from the industry guest here, is I think industry knows that this issue is big, and therefore I think industry is going to have a concentrated effort on trying to address the security issues, because they know in order for the government to really embrace mobility, the security issue is going to have to be dealt with. We've got just under 12 minutes to go in the show now, and I'd like to switch over, as we always do, to end the show by talking about the future, where we're all going with all this stuff. Let's work our way right down the table. We'll start with Bryan Coapstick at HP. Bryan, share a vision for the future. What kind of improvements are we going to see down the road? What kind of government will we have? What type of world as these mobility programs evolve?
So it's kind of funny. I wrote a blog almost a year ago that upon the release of the digital government strategy. And, in reality, the world's become mobile, hyper-connected, immediate, and fluid. And the government must really try and do its part in helping, reinvent, reimagine itself to a digital government. And, as part of the blog, I discussed what would that digital government look like, that, is able to respond and react, provide greater productivity and efficiency, especially in this budget climate. And, removing the distance barrier between the government, people, and information, taking a lesson from the financial crisis, which is very near. We all know that decisions made further away from loan origination generally ended up in more faulty loans. And so that same paradigm, ultimately exists in government. How do we enable the information to flow so decisions and actions are not so far removed from the people, and then by the same token make them permanently visible and active in the digital. And once you do make that information available, it spawns a dialogue, which I say is really the second tenet, using social power, where it becomes a much more representative democracy, and people actively are participating as part of the dialogue. And the statistic I always use is, I think it was about 40% of the Senate in 2011 was on Twitter. By 2012, 100%.
Wow.
Okay. And so the power of the constituency is really just beginning, and how it will be employed and leveraged. Right now, candidates are using to effectively disseminate out, but how do I make that a dialogue? And I think we're starting to see that. And what it's going to lead to is, a more enlightened, more engaged participant.
Better government.
Yeah. And I think you're also starting to see more meaningful interactions, okay? A government designed, that is designed to connect. Nobody, in many cases, it's going to streamline the bureaucracy and, provide greater speed and efficiency. Right. And we're able to consume when and where and how we want.
Okay, great. Good point. Fantastic. Jason, what do you think in terms of where this is all going? What's it going to look like in the future to you?
I think the future is going to be a very empowering experience for users. And we're going to see friction come out of the equation between employees and government workers. And as that friction comes out, they're going to become happier employees and more productive. The future is also going to be simpler. And so when we think about mobility technologies, what's fundamentally changed, and the path that we're on is around simplicity. It wasn't the mobile phone that made mobility fun. It was the fact that we had to make our applications and the data access simpler on those types of devices. So as we see these types of technologies drive forward around virtual agent interaction, augmented reality, we're going to see that we can do things in a simpler, more efficient fashion with mobility. And so I think as we continue to drive into the future, we're just going to see that trend accelerate more and more.
Very good. Appreciate it. Ken Nesbit, what do you think? What's your crystal ball look like? Where's this all going?
Well, so, it really is all about our constituency, if you will. How do we make what we do in government more available and usable to the person on the street, the people in their homes? At the same time, though, those of us in government have got to figure out a way to make our time better used. It sometimes gets to be about time management. Sure. It gets out of control, and that's why you end up working at 2 o'clock in the morning, because you just didn't get it done during the day. Right. So what we have to do in the future, not only does it have to be simpler, it also has to be from the perspective that we have a job to be done for the American people and for Congress, because they need information, the President because he needs data. So how do we as employees get that to them? Simpler, faster, easier to digest. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that our employees are happy. Mm-hmm. They don't have to schlep into the office every day and then schlep home. Yeah. How many of us have that hour, 2 hour, 3 hour commute to get back and forth from work? Right. We have to make it so that our employees can work in a place just about anywhere and get done the things that they need to get done. We have to do it securely. We have to do it safely. That's what the future needs to look like.
Yeah, terrific. I like it. Mike Pagani, what do you think? What's your crystal ball look like? Where's this all going?
Well, I think from our view of it here at Dell, too, and what we see, and I see every day, I've been in this space for about 5-6 years now in virtualization, which is the first discipline I did, but it ties into mobility, because if you virtualize a desktop, there's different things you do for mobility. It helps you out with security. It's almost like we talked about mainframes and terminals and things like that. Well, back in 5250 days, VT terminal access was, we knew everything was locked up, and you can only do so much with a green screen. screen, right? But even if it was mobile. But what I see going on here is consolidation right now. And what I mean by that is taking the one device and have it have multiple personalities. So somebody doesn't have to carry two different cell phones. You know, they can take that one device and configure it at the push of a button so that it's in the workplace, you know, mode, or what I'm doing for my work, and then flip into personal mode with just as easy. And the other thing is empowerment for IT, not just for the users. Yes, we're reducing the friction on the user side with things like that, but really enabling IT to take advantage of mobility without the risk and without the added burden. So if somebody wants to onboard a new device at 3 o'clock in the morning, there doesn't have to be somebody there to hold their hand. Those technologies are there to allow that to happen securely and efficiently so that person can start being productive with that device where they happen to be when they want to do it. So I think that's sort of what I see. And, you know, the workplace has given way to the workspace.
Okay.
Okay, and that workspace is your workspace and all the apps you need, the data you need, and the connectivity that goes with it, to it. And that's what IT's got to manage. And it doesn't matter whether that employee is inside the four walls or they're sitting on a beach.
Right.
That workspace is the workspace.
Right.
So I see consolidation as being
Very
the
interesting. I actually saw a device the other day where if you you hit the icon for a personal application, all the business stuff shuts off automatically. And then if you hit something for a business application, all the personal stuff shuts off automatically. So you can't mix the two. Eric, what do you think? Where's this all going down the road? What's it look like to you in the future?
At the Department of Justice, we think the future looks something like this. So we've effectively got a device in every employee's hand where it makes business use to do so. We have effectively extended our enterprise edge and to the greatest degree merged what a desktop is versus what a mobile device is. We're exploiting those capabilities that exist on a mobile phone, again, like the biometrics I mentioned earlier, the camera, things of that nature. And we're deploying applications that can leverage those. And we've moved to sort of a posture of mobile by default. So we're not talking about all the things in essence that we're dealing with now, so we're sort of over that. And we're building applications and infrastructure from the get-go designed with mobility in mind from the very beginning.
Terrific. I like it. Think mobility first with everything you're doing. Rick Walsh, what's it look like to you down the road, Rick? Where's this all going?
Future for the Army is going to be, in very simple terms, think of it as connected users. And I think we're going to see is what's going to happen with mobility. Today, we look at mobility as an enabler. It's enabling new technologies, new stuff. In a short period of time, mobility itself is going to become the driver. I think that's what we're going to see is it's no longer going to be what I do to, mobility is going to let me do these things. Mobility is going to be what I do. It's not going to be to do something else. Mobility is going to be there for me to do it. So it's going to be the driver in my future IT expenditures, my future IT looking. And that is, at the ultimate end, is a connected user base.
Right.
And that's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let me try to do a little bit of summarizing here. We first talked strategy, and I think what I heard from most is that the strategy is to focus on the user and focus on the data as opposed to the device and identify what it is that is really necessary for that particular user and get them whatever they need. We also talked a little bit about BYOD as a strategy, and I think what I heard is a strategy, but it's going to move cautiously as we move along because there are a lot of constraints and there are a lot of hoops and things that need to be adjusted. But nevertheless, you can't leave it out of your long-term vision because as time goes on, it's going to get more and more demand for that, and budgets are probably going to drive more towards doing things like that. We talk a lot about benefits. The one I liked is happy employees. I thought was an interesting discussion we had here. And then we talked about benefits focused on mission accomplishment, not about everybody has a device, but we're improving our mission and working on it. Heard a lot about new ways to collaborate, that just by getting the devices out there and getting them in the hands of the key people, collaboration happens, innovation happens, people come up with ways to do things better, and of course that ultimately means better productivity for the organization. We talked about challenges, risk management and security certainly is up there and as an important thing. And we talked about the time to market, especially in government agencies where it's hard to get things out there quickly and meet all the requirements that the government has, yet technology changes rapidly. And again, as the younger workplace or younger folks enter the workplace, they're going to expect the latest and greatest, not 3 generations back. We once again hit that culture issue, which seems to come up with every show we do, and I think we all shake our heads when we mention that internally in organizations, that culture issue it can be a real challenge moving forward with anything. And of course, money. Money is tight, and it doesn't look like it's going to be much different. So it's going to require industry to come up with creative solutions that reduce cost. In order to get this stuff out there, there's going to have to be offsetting cost. Security, we said, is evolving, and there's software sales. We heard from Mike has gone way, way up, security software, and industry knows the issue. And industry, I think, will be addressing the issue as time goes on. It will evolve just like everything else. In the future, we talk simpler, we talk faster, we talk knowledge sharing. And I hope that's all correct. I think it is, because I'm very, very impatient. And so when I don't have to go to the government agency and stand in line anymore, I'll be a very, very happy person. And I am counting on mobility addressing some of them. First, I want to thank our panelists for taking time from your very, very busy schedules to share your knowledge and talk a little bit about the things you're doing in this space with us.